Top 10. Top 10. My picks for the top 10 NHL goaltenders of all time. List does not include current players. So we'll start off with number 10. Glenn Hall. He's the goaltender that popularized the butterfly style of net minding, which dominated for the next decade or so. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a longtime Chicago Blackhawks goaltender. Number 9. One of my personal favorites of all time, Tony Esposito. Tony O, if you will. Tony Esposito, he played pretty much his whole career with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think he played 2 games with the Montreal Canadiens before he joined the Blackhawks, because that was the team that originally drafted him. I liked him though. He truly brought the butterfly style into its own. Tony Esposito.
Number 8.
Dominic Hasek. Oh, I know some people are thinking, hey, why is the Dominator so low on this list? Well, there's a lot of other good goalies on this list. I take nothing away from Dominic Hasek. He truly had a style that was very unique, but he did dominate in the 90s, and he did win a Stanley Cup with the Detroit Red Wings. Number 7, Ken Dryden, the guy that basically backstopped the Canadiens through most of the 70s. He won 6 Stanley Cups, and he only played 8 seasons. He broke records. Mind you, he was with one of the greatest teams in history, but still, they still wouldn't have accomplished anything without Ken Dryden, and his numbers are absolutely ridiculous. He still holds the record for best save percentage throughout an entire career. Number 6, Bernie Parent. There was an old saying in Philadelphia back in the day that only God saved more than Bernie Parent. Bernie Parent, he backstopped the Philadelphia Flyers to 2 Stanley Cups and was the first, I would consider, elite goaltender that the club ever had. Bernie Parent has been a mainstay in the organization since he retired. Number 5, Johnny Bower, the Toronto Maple Leaf great and the inventor of the poke check. Johnny Bower was one of those massless warriors, and man, he won quite a few Stanley Cups with Toronto through the 60s, and by the time he became an NHL superstar, he was already considered over the hill because he was in his early 30s before he made the NHL as a regular goaltender. Number 4, the great Terry Sawchuk. For the longest time, his numbers dominated the record books. Terry Sawchuk played with all the great Detroit teams in the 50s. And again, him and Johnny Bower backstopped the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I might add, in the twilight of their career at the time, to the 1967 Stanley Cup Final. Number 3, Jacques Palant. All I have to say about Jacques Palant is the numbers speak for himself. He won 5 Stanley Cups in a row. The guy, was a god in Montreal in his heyday. But the thing with him that he's probably will always be best known for is the guy that created the goaltending mask. The old fiberglass mask. He was not the first goaltender to wear a mask, but the first one to use a fiberglass model that was used for the next decade or so. But it saved lives. It absolutely saved lives. And Jacques Palant was a great teacher. He taught many great goalies after him how to play the game. And he was really the first one that thought that goaltending wasn't you just stood in front of a net and let the puck hit you. He actually said, you know what, there's technique, there's art form, there's a proper way to make a save, and I'm going to teach it. So there's really nothing else you can say about Jacques Palant. Number 2. Patrick Waugh, another Montreal Canadian legend. Most of us know about Patty Waugh and what he accomplished in his career. Won Stanley Cups in Montreal and in Colorado. Won many Vezinas. Probably the most dominant goaltender of his time, especially in the 80s and early 90s when he first came in. For sure a Hall of Famer, Patty Waugh. And before I get to number 1, I want to name off a few honorable mentions. 1, Grant Fuhr. 2, Roberto Luongo. 3, Billy Smith. 4, Ed Belfour. 5, Rogie Vachon. 6, Clint Benedict. 7. George Vezina, 8. Grunt Worsley, 9. Frank Brismick, and 10. Ron Hextall.
Now for number 1.
It should be no surprise, Martin Brodeur. The numbers speak for themselves. The Stanley Cups speak for themselves. He has the most shutouts, the most wins. He is basically the Wayne Gretzky of goaltending. That's really all I have to say to sum up this list. Next episode, we will have the top 10 Saturday morning cartoons of all time, as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, in my humble opinion. So, until next week, that's been the top 10.